Hi, this is Sean D'Souza, and you're listening to the 3-Month Vacation Podcast. This podcast isn't some magic trick about how to work less. Instead, it's about how to really enjoy the work that you do and to enjoy your vacation time. Hi, it's Sean, and you're listening to the 3-Month Vacation. We've been doing 3 episodes. Well, this is the 3rd episode, but the first episode started out with this whole factor of, is the market saturated? And we found out why it was not saturated. We then went on to getting the first step in that whole momentum cycle. You're standing at the starting line, and we're not talking about the finish. We're talking about the first step. And we explored how you go from topic to subtopic and why all of that is important. Now, it doesn't matter if you've jumped in at this podcast episode itself, but it would make sense to go back and listen to the others as well. This one is about what I would do if I had to get started today. As you probably know, we started out in the year 2000, which is ages ago now. Nothing much has changed. The concepts are remarkably similar. It's noisier, of course, but it doesn't matter. You can still get into this so-called saturated market and still get going. But people often ask me, what would you do if you started today? And I'm going to talk about 3 things. The first thing is about shock and awe. The second thing is consistency in a theme. And the third is, strangely, to cut back once you've done enough. Let's start out with the first one, which is shock and awe. When we started out in marketing, which as you know is the year 2000, the world was a remarkably different place. People looked at you blankly when you talked about websites. And email was about a 50-50 split between people who had email and those who had no clue what you were on about. Into such a world, a single article would bring a lot of subscribers. Sometimes we would get 50 subscribers, sometimes 100. Just one article. Such a world doesn't exist anymore. We know that. And that's what our logic tells us. But logic is based on analogy, which is to say that we look around and we see what's happening around us. We see that most people are doing things in a certain way and they're not getting very far. And we have to drop that analogy. We have to get slightly illogical. We have to improve our skills and therefore improve our chances to increase our revenue. And that's why when I'm asked to answer this question, what would you do if you started today? I take a dollop of logic and I mix it with something that makes no sense at all. So what is shock and awe? In a world that's complaining about overwhelming amount of content, what is the logical way to deal with such a situation? You would reduce the content, wouldn't you? Well, how about being illogical? Turn it right up. Turn up that volume. Instead of creating content once every 15 days or once every 20 days, do it every day. And I know how ridiculous this sounds, not only from the perspective of putting it out there, but from creating it. I mean, how much work does it take to create content every single day? But here's the thing, it doesn't have to be good, it just has to exist. And if you keep putting that out, what happens is then you become better at it week after week, and it's probably going to take a while, but you will become better at it. And then there is this stream of content which gives you a much better option to get noticed. Well, that's what I would do. We look at the world around us and we say, well, everything has already a ramped up noise effect. And I would want my music to be the loudest. I would want it to be the most consistent. When everyone has stopped playing their music at midnight, I'd want to go until 7 a.m. And this might sound very ridiculous to the logical mind, but it's precisely what is going to make you far superior in quality and quantity than you are right now. Will this bring you clients right away? Most likely not. But in time, and as you get better and faster, someone is going to notice. And because it's backbreaking to go on such a bizarre journey, you will start to look around you and think, well, how can I get some shortcuts? How can I get some efficiencies? And you'll also look at, well, how can I promote this better? How can I get to some joint venture or some system where it goes out and not just churning out this stuff? So you're going to force yourself to think differently, because you know that just putting 30 articles on your blog or just putting 30 videos on YouTube is not exactly going to start everyone looking at your content. In fact, nobody's going to be looking at it for a while. But it will force you to think differently. It will force you to write differently, to create more efficiencies. And that's why a huge volume of content is critical. This is precisely what I had to do when I started out, and my medium was writing, and I was not very good at writing. It took me such a long time to write every single article, 2 days, and yet I decided to put out an article every single day. Well, not Saturday and Sunday, but 5 days a week. And that's how we built 5000 BC, the membership site. It's more than likely that you're struggling to do whatever you do. You're struggling to create the content. You're struggling to get people to look at stuff. The way to get better, faster, and to get more proficient at what you do is just create more content. 1 a day. How are you going to do it? That's the first thing that I would do. You're asking me, right? So I'm telling you, this is the first thing I would do. The second thing I would do is to have consistency with a theme. Let's say I was starting a restaurant, for example. I wouldn't just start another Indian restaurant. I'd call it No Butter Chicken. Incidentally, butter chicken is the most popular dish in Indian restaurants in New Zealand. So why would you go down the road of calling it No Butter Chicken? Or if I were to start up a cafe, I wouldn't just start up another cafe. Instead, I'd call it something like Coffee Snob. And the coffee would cost 10% more than any other place, but there would be no wishy-washy stuff. Now, you don't have to be so in your face to get a theme going. On medium.com, no one knows me at all. I seem to have some followers, but possibly some cat writing articles have more followers than me. Even so, a theme would help me, and it helps us focus. That's the beauty. If I want to write a string of articles on Medium, then I have to think of what am I going to write about. And I thought of a theme which is called reframe, which means that instead of simply solving marketing and business problems with the usual mindset, you turn things around. You'd look at the same problem in a different way. Now I have a theme, and when I have that theme, and when you have that theme, you can sit down and list all the things that you can do within that specific kind of theme, but it also appeals to other people because we as human beings love categories, and themes, well, they're a category. Having this kind of consistency is a form of branding, and in a world of boring yada yada stuff, you start to get attention. And then once you've churned out a ton of content and you've stuck a solid theme to it, you go into illogical land again. Which takes us to the third part. We started down this illogical trend of creating content every day, even though we're not good at it, even though we're going to struggle with it. It was where we started. And then The second thing was to find a theme and to work that theme. But the third part is to cut back. You're going at 100 miles an hour and poof, you've stopped. Not stopped, you've slowed down. Let's find out what's in the third part. You've done a lot, and it might be sensible to keep going. No, not really. Even if you're brimming with lots of great ideas, it's time to cut back. For all of those who keep going, there's only the promise of burnout and frustration. You won't see that on YouTube or in their writing. People are always talking about how successful they are, but they're just so tired, so exhausted, and for what? People are either talking about how they spend only 4 hours working every week, which is ridiculous, or they glorify how much of a workaholic they are. And both of them are just insane. That 4-hour work week, that's completely nutty because no one that I know except those in a retirement home works so little. I know people, on the other hand, who work too much. And if you manage to get the content going, you should be able to put out the content at a decent enough pace without burning through the sky like a meteor. Having a decent amount of content enables people to find you and then go through your back catalog. People find a good comedian on YouTube and they watch all the comedy that person can deliver. You'll find a great author and you can't get enough of his or her books. You attend an outstanding course, and then you want to do more courses with that person. But you, as the author, as the creator, as the course person, you need to ease back. You need to put the content out. You need to make sure that the work gets seen, but don't fry yourself in the process. If I were starting up again, that's exactly what I'd do, which is also currently what I do. We pour out huge amounts of content. We have continued to do so non-stop since 2000. We've added to it in terms of podcasts, in terms of other media. And we've also had a theme. We continue to refine those themes as we go along. For instance, the courses that we first conducted were good, but we made it better by adhering to the theme of not just information, but skill instead. And so you create a lot of this stuff, you have your theme, and finally you cut back like crazy. Running a business is not about world domination and fame. It's about having more control over your life. Let the crazy ones go to bed at 3 a.m. and wake up at 5. You don't have to do the same at all. We started our business and we decided that we wanted time off. It took a few years before we could even come up with the idea of a 3-month vacation. But once we did, we worked out what we needed and we started to take those 3 months off every year. All of this seems impossible, it seems illogical, but it can be done. If you are starting today, you have to start going a little nuts. Scare yourself instead of being right in that comfort zone. Shock yourself and watch how you can look back in awe at all the things that you've achieved once the years pass. So that brings us to the end of this podcast. We had this in 3 sections, really. We started out with the myth of the saturated market. We found out that's not true. We saw why it was not true. Then we looked at 3 distinct methods of going down the road with your content, which is to come up with the topic, to then go into subtopics, and finally to go with the trend, because that's what people follow. And today we looked at what I would do if I were getting started today, which is exactly what I did way back. You put out a lot of content, you have a theme, and eventually you cut back. And if I've timed this right, this should be the last podcast of the year. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in 5000 BC. Did I say end of year? It's the end of the decade as well, so we'll see you in the next decade. Bye for now.